The afternoon sun, usually a comfort, felt like a spotlight on Eleanor's threadbare living room carpet as Michael burst through the door, a wide, boyish grin splitting his face. He held a crisp, white envelope aloft, his excitement palpable, completely oblivious to the tremor that just seized her hands. "Mom, you won't believe it!" he exclaimed, practically dancing. "I closed the deal. The big one." Eleanor forced a smile, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, every fiber of her being screaming for him to just stop talking. He pulled out a thick, official-looking document, a bank statement perhaps, or a check, and laid it gently on the coffee table between them. "It's for you," he said, his voice softening. "A down payment. For a fresh start, $130,000, just like I promised." The numbers swam before her eyes, a dizzying sum that represented not salvation, but a gaping chasm opening beneath her feet. This was more than she'd ever dared to dream. Yet it was also the precise amount that would expose the intricate web of lies she'd spun to keep her life from unraveling. Her carefully constructed facade, built on years of quiet desperation and hidden debt, now threatened to shatter into a million pieces. Michael's proud gaze met hers, full of love and expectation, and Eleanor knew with a sickening lurch that accepting this gift meant confessing everything, or burying herself deeper in a deception that could destroy them both. The paper felt impossibly heavy in her trembling fingers, a ticking time bomb disguised as a blessing. Some gifts come with a price no one expects. A secret, carefully guarded, is about to unravel. Kian's cheerful words echoed in the small living room, a stark contrast to the quiet dread settling in Alara's chest. He had pressed the sleek plastic card into her palm, his smile radiating genuine pride. The weight of his love, coupled with the staggering figure he'd mentioned, felt less like a blessing and more like a heavy stone. She averted her gaze, her fingers tracing the embossed numbers, each digit a fresh reminder of the impossible situation she found herself in. A tremor ran through her, a quiet alarm ringing in her mind, threatening to expose the fragile peace she had so meticulously maintained. The simplicity of his gesture made the complexity of her secret even more suffocating. She knew the truth about that card, a truth Kian could never fathom, a truth that could dismantle everything they held dear. Her throat tightened, a silent plea for time, for a way out that didn't involve tearing down the very foundation of their trust. The afternoon sun, usually a comforting presence, now felt like an interrogator, illuminating every one of her unspoken fears. She needed a moment, a breath, before the facade crumbled entirely. Later that evening, the apartment felt eerily silent, amplifying Alara's racing thoughts. She sat at the kitchen table, the bank card a solitary rectangle under the weak overhead light. The plastic felt cold against her fingertips, a tangible representation of Kian's boundless generosity and her profound deception. Her mind replayed his joyous declaration, the amount a dizzying sum that could solve so many of her problems, yet simultaneously deepen her predicament beyond repair. A wave of guilt washed over her, a bitter taste in her mouth as she considered the chasm between his perception and her reality. Every fiber of her being urged her to confess, to lay bare the truth before it consumed them both. But fear, an old and familiar companion, held her captive, whispering doubts about the consequences, the inevitable heartbreak in Kian's. She traced the card's edges, a silent prayer escaping her lips for guidance, for strength to navigate this treacherous path. The following day, Alara found herself standing before an ATM, the card clutched tight in her hand. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm that matched the ticking of the seconds. Each step she had taken from her apartment to this impersonal machine felt like a march towards an inevitable reckoning. She inserted the card, the small mechanical whirring sound echoing unnaturally loud in the quiet bank lobby. The screen lit up, displaying the familiar prompts, but her vision blurred slightly, her hands trembling as she entered the PIN. This wasn't merely a transaction. It was a moment of truth, a direct confrontation with the secret she had guarded so fiercely. A bead of sweat trickled down her temple, the air in the sterile space suddenly too thin to breathe. She hesitated, her finger hovering over the withdrawal option, the magnitude of what she was about to do weighing heavily on her conscience. The machine hummed, a brief pause that stretched into an eternity. Then, a message flashed across the screen, stark and impersonal, a digital pronouncement of her worst fears. Alara's breath caught in her throat. The numbers Kian had so confidently stated, the figure that promised relief, were nowhere to be found. Instead, a chilling, unexpected reality stared back at her, confirming the impossible. Her carefully constructed world, already teetering, now felt like it was crumbling around her. She pulled the card out, her movements slow and disbelieving, her mind racing to comprehend how this could be. The weight of Kian's trust, the memory of his proud smile, now felt like an unbearable burden. This wasn't just about money, it was about the truth. And the card's silent refusal had just revealed a catastrophic error. Or perhaps, a deeper, more painful deception than she could have ever imagined. Her world tilted, the sterile bank lobby spinning around her. The screen's cruel message, a stark denial of Kian's generous claim, reverberated in her mind, silencing all other thoughts. This wasn't merely a lack of funds, it was an impossible contradiction, an unraveled thread in the fragile tapestry of her life. A cold dread seeped into her bones, replacing the initial shock with a profound sense of betrayal, though she couldn't yet pinpoint its source. Was it a mistake? A cruel joke? Or something far more sinister? Her grip on the card tightened, the plastic digging into her palm, a physical anchor in the whirlwind of her panic. She felt exposed, vulnerable, as if the entire world could see the shattered pieces of her carefully constructed facade. The weight of her own undisclosed financial woes, already a heavy burden, now felt crushing, intensified by Kian's unwitting pronouncement. She needed answers, a desperate clarity in this sudden, suffocating fog of confusion. Every rational thought was drowned out by the rising tide of fear and confusion. The implications of this unexpected emptiness threatened to unravel everything she had painstakingly built. Back in the quiet solitude of her apartment, Alara paced, the silence amplifying the frantic beat of her heart. She held the card, turning it over and over, as if scrutinizing its surface could reveal the hidden truth. Her laptop hummed to life, its familiar glow offering little comfort as she navigated to the bank's online portal. Each click of the mouse felt like a step further into a labyrinth of uncertainty, her fingers fumbling slightly as she tried to log in. The numbers Kian had spoken, the $130,000, echoed in her memory, a cruel whisper of hope now extinguished. She scrolled through transaction histories, statement summaries, but found no trace of such a deposit. Instead, her own meager balance stared back at her, a stark reminder of her escalating financial precarity, made worse by the very problem Kian had unknowingly tried to solve. The truth, whatever it was, remained stubbornly out of reach, shrouded in a veil of digital mystery and her son's bewildering generosity. A growing suspicion gnawed at her, hinting at a misunderstanding far deeper than a simple banking error. The weight of potential future consequences pressed down, a suffocating blanket of dread. Days later, a subtle shift in Alara's demeanor began to chip away at Kian's cheerful disposition. He noticed her distracted gaze during their usual evening calls, the slight tremor in her voice when she spoke of mundane things, the way she evaded his questions about her plans for the gift. His mother, usually a pillar of calm resilience, now seemed to carry an invisible weight, her shoulders slightly hunched, her smile a little less bright. He tried to engage her, to draw out whatever troubled her, but she skillfully deflected, her responses polite but distant. A knot of concern tightened in his stomach. His genuine desire to help had perhaps inadvertently caused her distress, though he couldn't fathom how. He watched her from across the kitchen table during a brief visit. He wished she would open up, share whatever burden she was carrying. But her guarded nature remained intact. The silence between them, once comfortable, now felt laden with unspoken worries, a growing chasm. Kian's usual light-hearted banter felt hollow in the face of her quiet suffering, a poignant contrast he couldn't ignore. He felt a frustrating helplessness, unsure how to bridge the sudden emotional distance that had sprung up between them. His generous gesture meant to bring her joy seemed instead to have cast a shadow. A letter arrived, stark. Alara recognized the sender immediately, her blood running cold. It was a final notice, a demand for immediate payment that far exceeded her current capabilities. The precise figure, clearly stated, was a sum she knew she could never muster on her own, a direct threat to the roof over her head. The memory of Kian's confident pronouncement of $130,000 flashed through her mind, a cruel mockery of her current reality. She stared at the letter, its contents confirming her deepest fears. Her financial situation was spiraling beyond her control, and the gift from Kian, which she couldn't access, offered no salvation. The walls of her apartment suddenly felt closer, more suffocating, as if the very air was pressing down on her. The truth of her insolvency, coupled with the baffling mystery of Kian's card, converged into an overwhelming wave of despair. There was no escape. She had to confront him, no matter the cost. Her fingers trembled, crumpling the edges of the ominous paper. The moment she had dreaded, the moment of full disclosure, was no longer a distant threat, but an imminent, unavoidable reality. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm, a drumbeat of her impending confession. Alara clutched the final notice, its stark. The urgency of the situation pressed down on her, a suffocating weight that left no room for retreat. She knew she couldn't postpone the inevitable conversation with Kian any longer. The truth, however painful, had to be spoken. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of her apartment, each pulse echoing the enormity of her secret. She looked from the ominous letter to the sleek bank card, a symbol of Kian's love and her own mounting despair. The chasm between his generous intent and her bleak reality felt impossibly wide, a bridge she dreaded crossing. A cold knot formed in her stomach as she imagined the look on his face, the inevitable confusion, perhaps even betrayal. This wasn't just about money. It was about the years she had spent shielding him from their struggles, about the carefully constructed image of stability she had maintained. The thought of shattering that image, of revealing her vulnerability, was almost as terrifying as losing everything. She took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to summon a courage she wasn't sure she possessed. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder, counting down to a moment of truth she could no longer escape. She had to face her son, armed with nothing but the brutal honesty she had so long avoided. Kian's car pulled up to Alara's apartment building, his usual buoyant mood slightly subdued by his mother's recent quietness. He walked up the familiar steps, a vague sense of unease settling over him. Inside, Alara greeted him with a strained smile. The air between them felt thick, charged with unspoken words, a stark contrast to their usual easy camaraderie. She offered him a cup of tea, her hands trembling almost imperceptibly as she placed it before him. Kian watched her, his brow furrowed with concern, sensing the heavy burden she carried, yet utterly oblivious to its true nature. He wanted to ask, to push her to open up, but her closed-off demeanor deterred him. The apartment, usually a haven of warmth, now felt like a stage set for a difficult performance, the silence punctuated only by the clinking of cutlery. He cleared his throat, searching for a way to connect, to ease the tension that permeated the space. She avoided his gaze, her attention fixed on an unseen spot on the table, her body language a testament to her profound internal struggle. The moment stretched, heavy and uncomfortable between them. Alara finally found her voice, her words coming out in a rush, a delicate dance around the direct accusation she feared. She spoke of financial anxieties, of unexpected expenses, subtly steering the conversation towards the topic of her dwindling funds. Kian listened, his expression shifting from concern to a slight bewilderment, as if he couldn't quite grasp the connection to her current distress. He confidently reiterated his belief in the $130,000, his assurance a sharp pang in her chest, deepening her internal conflict. He mentioned how much he put on it for her, his generosity unwavering, yet so utterly misguided. His casual tone, the easy smile on his face, revealed a complete unawareness of the chasm between his perception and her dire reality. He genuinely believed he had solved her problems, leaving Alara feeling an even heavier weight of guilt and confusion. She tried to interject, to explain the discrepancy, but his unwavering conviction seemed to seal off any path to the truth. The irony was suffocating. His love was a cage, his gift a burden she couldn't escape. Her attempts to clarify only seemed to bounce off his resolute confidence, making her feel even more isolated in her secret. Desperate for clarity, Ilara finally pushed, her voice barely a whisper, asking directly about the card's balance, mentioning the ATM's refusal. Kian's cheerful demeanor instantly faltered, replaced by a look of profound shock, then a dawning realization. He frowned, pulled out his own wallet, and retrieved a different card, identical in appearance to the one he had given his mother. His understanding flickering across his face. He had made a mistake, a catastrophic oversight that now laid bare not just Ilara's secret, but perhaps his own. The air crackled with a sudden, devastating revelation. The $130,000 was indeed real, but it was on his card, not hers. A cold dread enveloped Ilara as she watched Kian's face drain of color, the full weight of his error, and the implications for her, crashing down on him. The silence that followed was deafening, a prelude to a truth far more complex and heartbreaking than either of them had anticipated. Her heart dropped, not just for her own predicament, but for the shock and shame she saw unfolding in her sons. The apartment fell into a silence far heavier than before, thick with the weight of Kian's dawning understanding. Ilara watched his face drain of color, the initial shock giving way to a profound, searing shame that etched itself into his features. His hand, still holding his own bank card, trembled almost imperceptibly, a stark contrast to his earlier confidence. The realization that he had not only made a mistake, but had also inadvertently exposed his mother's deepest fears, seemed to crush him. He stared at the two identical cards, symbols of his good intentions and his profound error, unable to reconcile the two. For Ilara, a strange mix of relief and renewed dread washed over her. The money was real, but the emotional cost of this revelation was steep. She saw his pain, a mirror to her own, and a new layer of complicated emotion settled between them. The carefully maintained facade of her life, already cracked, now seemed to splinter further under the pressure of this shared, raw vulnerability. The air was thick with unspoken apologies and unaddressed fears, trapping them both in a moment of agonizing truth. This unexpected turn exposed not only her secret, but also a deeper fragility in their bond, forcing them to confront uncomfortable truths. Kian's gaze dropped from the cards to the table, his shoulders slumping slightly as if under an invisible weight. He ran a hand through his neatly trimmed. The silence stretched, filled only by the quiet hum of the refrigerator, each passing second amplifying his internal turmoil. He had intended a grand gesture of support, a balm for whatever struggles his mother faced, only to inadvertently create more chaos and uncover a painful truth. Ilara's heart ached for him, seeing the usually buoyant ambition in his. She longed to reach out, to offer comfort, but her own predicament, the final notice still a burning presence in her mind, held her captive. The irony was bitter. His mistake, while devastating, now made her own secret less isolating, yet no less urgent. She watched him, a silent witness to his private agony, recognizing the depth of his love and the unintentional hurt it had caused them both. The moment was a crucible, forging a new, raw understanding between mother and son, born from error and unspoken suffering. The unspoken question hung heavy in the air between them. What now? Kian finally pushed his chair back, the scrape against the linoleum floor a harsh sound in the quiet room. He stood, pacing a small circuit in the limited space, his movements agitated, a stark contrast to Ilara's stillness. She knew, without a word being spoken, that he was already devising a plan, trying to right his wrong, to mend the unintended damage. Her own relief that the money existed was quickly overshadowed by the renewed urgency of her financial crisis and the painful knowledge of his mortification. She watched him, her gaze a mix of empathy and quiet desperation, understanding that their carefully constructed emotional boundaries had irrevocably shifted. The simple act of transferring funds, which once seemed like a lifeline, now felt burdened with the weight of their shared vulnerability and the exposure of her long-held secret. The air was thick with the silent renegotiation of their relationship, each movement and glance a coded message of love, regret, and the daunting path ahead. Their connection, forged in crisis, was deepening in unexpected ways, but the path forward remained unclear. Later that day, Kian made a series of quick calls, his voice low and deliberate, a stark contrast to his earlier stunned silence. Ilara hovered nearby, feigning preoccupation with a task, but her ears strained to catch fragments of his conversation with his bank. A flicker of hope ignited within her, followed immediately by a surge of anxiety. The path to solvency now seemed so close, yet still fraught with potential pitfalls. Kian's brow furrowed again as he hung up. A new line of concern etched between his eyebrows. He turned to her, a hesitant, apologetic look in his. The immediate transfer he had envisioned was complicated by an unexpected banking protocol, a security measure that would require more than just a simple click of a button. The large sum triggered an additional layer of verification, a bureaucratic hurdle that felt insurmountable in their urgent situation. The relief she had begun to feel evaporated, replaced by the chilling realization that their ordeal was far from over, potentially delaying the critical funds for days, perhaps even weeks, leaving her future hanging precariously in the balance. The weight of the banking protocol felt like another insurmountable wall, a bureaucratic labyrinth designed to thwart their urgent need. Kian on the phone again, his voice strained and low, navigated endless hold music and unhelpful automated responses. Alara watched him, a knot of fresh anxiety tightening in her stomach. The final notice still a stark reminder of their dwindling time. Each frustrated sigh from Kian was a punch to her own already fragile hope, reinforcing the difficulty of accessing the substantial sum. She felt a profound helplessness, her gaze fixed on the phone in his hand, as if willing the connection to yield a different, more favorable outcome. The initial relief that the money existed had been quickly overshadowed by the maddening impossibility of actually getting it. Her own financial despair, momentarily eased by Kian's revelation, now threatened to return with full force, amplified by the near miss of salvation. Kian's determination was evident in the set of his jaw, but even his youthful energy seemed to be chipping away under the relentless pressure. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a pressure cooker, the silence punctuated only by Kian's hushed, exasperated pleas into the receiver. She longed for a simple solution, a swift resolution to the crisis that hung over them both. Kian hung up, a heavy silence descending upon the room, his face etched with a new kind of resolve that went beyond mere frustration. He turned to Alara, his gaze softening with a silent apology for the added stress. But he knew the $130,000 was hers, a gift he intended. But waiting for the banking system felt like a betrayal of her immediate need. He moved to his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard with renewed purpose, a stark contrast to his earlier hesitant attempts. Alara watched him, a slow understanding dawning in her. He wasn't just trying to transfer money. He was finding an immediate solution, even if it meant a personal sacrifice. His focus was absolute, his ambition now channeled entirely into protecting her. She saw him navigating through his own accounts, making a difficult decision, weighing his own security against her desperate need. The thought of him potentially liquidating some of his own savings to cover her rent filled her with a complex mix of gratitude and guilt. This was more than just a son helping his mother. It was a profound act of love and unwavering commitment. The weight of his generosity, now combined with his willingness to sacrifice, humbled her deeply. A few hours later, a notification pinged on Alara's phone, a small, unassuming sound that heralded a monumental shift. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the banking app, her breath catching in her throat as she saw the new balance. Not the full $130,000, but enough, more than enough, to cover the immediate threat of the final notice and give her breathing room. Kian stood beside her, his earlier tension replaced by a quiet sense of triumph and relief, a gentle smile playing on his lips. He hadn't waited. He had found a way to bridge the gap, using his own readily available funds to ensure her security. Tears welled in Alara's Kian's unwavering love and his selfless act. She reached out, her hand finding his, a silent acknowledgement of his sacrifice and her profound gratitude. The invisible weight that had pressed down on her for so long began to lift, replaced by a lightness she hadn't felt in years. The future, once a source of dread, now held a glimmer of hope, a testament to the powerful bond between them. In that moment, the money was secondary to the emotional healing that had just begun. Weeks turned into a quiet month, and the immediate crisis had faded into memory, replaced by a renewed sense of stability and an open honesty between Alara and Kian. The full $130,000 after navigating the banking protocols had finally arrived in her account, a secure foundation for her future. Alara, no longer burdened by her secret, found herself speaking more freely, sharing her thoughts and even some past anxieties with Kian during their regular evening visits. Kian, in turn, listened with a deeper understanding, his initial youthful naivete replaced by a mature empathy, recognizing the struggles his mother had quietly endured. Their bond, once tested by deception and error, had emerged stronger, built on a foundation of vulnerability and unwavering support. They sat together in her newly secure apartment, the air light and peaceful, a testament to the trust they had rebuilt. The quiet comfort of their shared presence spoke volumes, a narrative of resilience, love, and the profound strength of family. Alara looked at Kian, a profound sense of peace settling over her, knowing that even in the face of daunting challenges, they had found their way back to each other, stronger and more connected than ever before. Thank you for watching this episode of Drama Unveiled. Please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more heartfelt stories.